What's good, YouTube? Today I'm going to be talking to y'all about gabapentin versus marijuana for anxiety slash PTSD slash complex PTSD. So the last few weeks I've been talking about one, like how I was prescribed to take gabapentin for my anxiety because I have really bad anxiety. Then I also talked about how I use cannabis slash marijuana to also like self-medicate sort of my anxiety and like sort of my experiences with that and like how it helps me like essentially a lot, but like, the whole stigma around it is kind of like meh. Along with like general anxiety that I have, a lot of it has to do with like my complex PTSD that I have surrounding like trauma that has happened like throughout like my childhood and like all of that blah 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 blah. But that's where like a lot of my anxiety sort of comes from. I've talked a lot about the comorbidity of like my different mental illnesses, like from complex PTSD to like attachment disorder to like just general anxiety to bipolar disorder to like ADHD. And like if you have all this shit, like how the hell do you treat it, especially when some things like backfire like on other things? So like what are you really treating? Like am I treating my anxiety or am I treating like my PTSD at the time? And I think that in therapy a few months ago I really learned that like a big part of my anxiety that I have is around my PTSD. So like we probably should be like trying to work on this, considering that like I still have a hella problems that I've sort of, not hella problems, I'm not like fucked up or anything, but like, we have to work on ourselves. What I learned about PTSD is that the trauma that is like impacted or like that causes like what we call PTSD or like sort of what happens in the brain for that, it happens in the prefrontal cortex. More specifically, it diminishes connectivity between the ventromedial prefrontal cortex and the amygdala, I believe it's called. So causing neuron dysfunction between those two elements within the brain and like a few other parts, I believe, is sort of what causes like the effects of PTSD, which are essentially like that high anxiety and hyperarousal like symptoms within people. Essentially what I have like 24/7 that I've been trying to figure out how to not have 24/7. Actual interesting part about it, the same like hyperarousal anxiety that's shown to like be the reason why PTSD is like so debilitating, that same anxiety is fixed by the endocannabinoid system like when you smoke cannabis. Marijuana or cannabis as it is acts on the body's endocannabinoid system. I hope I'm saying that right. Within like the endocannabinoid like signaling system, within that they know that those signals or those processes like affect how we respond to fear and anxiety. So they know that the processes within that system like are directly tied to like when you're stressed the fuck out. So it's hypothesized that that same like receptor signaling system within the endocannabinoid system could be tied to like PTSD and sort of like reversing the effects of it. The idea is that if you use cannabis or marijuana, you're essentially increasing the receptor's ability to like do its job, from what I understand. Essentially, the cannabinoids are prompting the receptors located within the endocannabinoid system itself. I believe like the receptors are like CB1 and CB2. That essentially increases the signals, which therefore increases the neurotransmitters to actually send all like the happiness and the good feelings and shit. So like any other drug, it seems like marijuana helps to like regulate slash promote slash fix the deficiency within brain slash neurotransmitter chemicals. What the research shows is that it has the possibility to help like with sleeping, has the possibility to help with nightmares, has the possibility to help with like that severe anxiety that's what I mostly experience, like that feeling of panic and like locking up. Can also help with like suicidal ideation, emotional numbing, depression. It says specifically like because it focuses on like hyperarousal anxiety, it can help like have those like if it can help prevent like flashbacks or like the reemergence of those feelings, which I think especially could be powerful with complex PTSD because it really is trauma like over long periods of time that are like built into you. So again, like I am no scientist by any mean, and like that was a rough explanation about like how marijuana can possibly like help anxiety slash like PTSD, but I think it's important to like try to understand like the science behind it and especially like what research is being done by it, because for me and I think people who have similar cases like me, who have like struggled with mental illness like literally their entire life, and who have been on almost every single like medication possible. And you have like just layers and layers of mental illness and like built up behavioral patterns, and like there is not just like a quick fix. It's gonna take like a method that like, you know, has to be changed. Like it's a lot. The recovery is a lot. I think you have to really understand like medicines and like recovery patterns to like a deeper level, a deeper degree. Not that like, you know, I'm a doctor or anything, or that like I know what the fuck I'm talking about. I'm just saying that like I think this is all interesting. Gabapentin. I thought gabapentin was interesting because like I have done videos on how it helps like anxiety, but I couldn't find a lot of information on like how gabapentin specifically helped like PTSD. So in terms of, I guess, like the differences in terms of how it's made me feel, like I think even though I use marijuana, and even though that like I highly recommend it and it's great for my anxiety and my purposes, one, I don't live in a state where like I can access like certain strands that would improve those feelings of anxiety. So I'm really just kind of using whatever I can get, and like it's not like that's like not medically like how you're supposed to do it. And saying that like it is, I believe would be like kidding myself. Like it's like, no, I'm not. Like I do it and it does calm me, but like for the most part, like I'm not. That's like not how you do medicine, if that makes sense. The other part of it's just simply like it's like expensive, and like insurance doesn't cover cannabis. I think that there's also a large stigma around it, and that's definitely like a big part. Like even with my therapists and psychiatrists, like they know that I smoke, but like they don't like the idea. They just are like, okay, we'll monitor you and like make sure things are good. If anything changes, like just let us know. Like we don't think it's the best, but like if you say it's helping you, then like I guess we can't like say anything like is wrong against that. So that's like kind of like why I went to gabapentin. I've like seen some research that, you know, talks about like how it's good and like the effects of it. So I was like, okay, why not try that? It's a little bit like, it's a different chemical compound than like most mood stabilizers, which means it's like a little bit less serious of a drug. At least that's how I understand it. And like everyone seems to be okay when I'm like, oh yeah, I take gabapentin for anxiety, than when I'm like, oh, I smoke like marijuana or cannabis like for my anxiety. Like when I say that, people like look at me like either like, yeah, let's get fucked up, which is like, yeah, but like it's also like, no, I'm serious, dude, like for real, believe me. They're like, yeah, sure. Or they're just like it's bad, don't do that, like it can like flare up so many other things. So that's why like it's kind of like I feel like I can't just, I'm afraid. I feel like I'll be like, I don't want to be that person. But like when I look at my experiences, it's weird because like when I use cannabis and marijuana, those feelings of fear and panic like diminish significantly. And like when I say I have anxiety, it's not just I feel some type of way towards like a response, or like I have anxiety. It's like I am generally like fearful, like I am afraid, like even if it's subconsciously, like there is a fight or flight response in my body that is causing like a physical response as well as like a mental response, to the point where like if someone was chasing you, like a serial killer was in your house trying to kill you, like that feeling I'm having towards like a phone call. And you get like a lot of phone calls or a lot of texts like throughout the day. So like imagine like a serial killer trying to kill you like multiple times throughout the day. So like that feeling I don't want to have. And marijuana significantly helps to like reduce those feelings. It doesn't fix it by any means. Like it doesn't make it like go away, but it helps it makes it more manageable, and like the science behind it actually makes sense. Gabapentin like I guess like helps me go to sleep, which a lot of people like the science behind that, like the very few studies that are out there say like, you know, it helps with sleep and like nightmares and gets rid of that, but like the science is very limited on it, and honestly like it doesn't help that much. At the end of the day, I think it's important to realize that like, they talk about how marijuana like helps you, but then they also talk about like how it can harm you. I think that's the same with any type of like substance that you put into your body, any type of medication, any type of anything. There's always a risk that it could not be like great for you. And that's like, the article could word it differently, but the journal really just talks about like how like marijuana is not like the type of like anxiety thing for everybody because it acts in opposite ways. But that's the same thing for like antidepressants. When you take it, it's like, oh, this like could help you, or it could also make you more suicidal. It happens with like anti-anxiety medications. It happens with gabapentin. Some people say it helps them. Some people say it doesn't help them. But yet we stigmatize marijuana so much to the point where, like, if I tell my doctor something that's been used like throughout time, if I tell my doctor like, hey, like marijuana helps me, like they've tried to convince me that like, oh, marijuana is not actually helping you. You just like think it's helping you because you're like addicted to it. And it's like, no, I like maybe like I do listen to them. I don't just like, I'm not a doctor. I don't just like cast it out and say like, no, fuck you. You don't know what you're talking about. Like I listen to them, and like that's why we monitor it so closely, and I'm trying to get better at like how I use it and like monitoring that and like there's different strands. But at the same time, it's like I also know like how I'm feeling, like my body, and like, no, I'm doing this because it helps me. I could be addicted to gabapentin, which is also apparently, like from the research I've done, is like an ongoing problem. Like people are becoming more dependent and addicted to that. So like for some reason, I just have this stigma in my mind about marijuana, and I think everyone does. And like obviously in some patients, like especially the THC component being like psychoactive, could harm me being bipolar, but like that doesn't mean I can't do CBD and like other things. So I don't know. I think it's just like really important to look at the different combinations of like your illnesses and like the medications, and look at things like this in different components and read about like how it affects different parts of our brains, so that like we can understand our disorders better, because like no one really understands shit. All right, y'all, I've rambled enough. Like, share, comment, subscribe. I want to hear from y'all. Let me know about your experiences with either of these medications for your anxiety / PTSD / disorder of some kind. I'll hit y'all back later, hopefully next week. All right, y'all.